kind of a wild track and a very difficult one to figure out exactly where the core of the storm would go. And while we always do say don't pay too much attention to that center line when we're initially showing you the cone, that center line though is kind of important because that usually indicates where the worst of the storm's effects will be experienced. And so that was pretty key to where the storm was going to move inland and whether or not we would see some of these little jogs one way or the other. So at least in what we saw was the worst of the storm started to weaken as it pushed northward. Unfortunately, though, impossible to say when some of those heavier rain bands will set up, and it's also near impossible to exactly forecast the storm surge. That's why we usually give kind of a range of numbers. Thankfully, some of the preliminary data that we have seen from the storm surge totals, we're not going to get anything official until probably the next couple of weeks, but thankfully it looks like most of those were on the lower side. Rainfall totals were a little bit more than we thought, and winds, while gusty at times, we were kind of thinking they could be even higher, and thankfully those didn't happen. So this is the track, and boy, it was kind of all over the place. Now, there are always these little wobbles. That is nothing new. It was just when it started to move inland, the center started to become a little bit more separated from the heavies of the rainfall, and that was likely from that strong wind shear. And we'll talk more about that as we kind of analyze the storm over the coming days. This was after the storm northeastern eye wall started to move through Plaquemine, or excuse me, through Terrebonne Parish and then into Lafourche. And it was at 5 o'clock that the Hurricane Center said that the storm made landfall. And something we had been discussing was that it did make landfall as a Category 2, but a little misleading. Hurricane hunters were able to decipher maybe one of their observations of 100-mile-per-hour winds, so that makes the entire storm a Cat 2. Guarantee no surface-based observations, at least inland, observed 100-mile-per-hour winds, maybe offshore, but inland, that was definitely not the case. But again, it is sometimes, I know, a little bit misleading. As we got later into the afternoon, that's when we started to see those storms setting up over northern Terrebonne, Lafourche, and started to move into the river parishes. That what started the heavy flooding. As the center of the storm kind of moved northward slowly, the band of heavy rainfall at this point in the night, I think we're calling it kind of an arc of rain, just started to sit over the metropolitan area. And it really took until after 9 o'clock for all of that rainfall to finally move on. Thankfully, at this point in the night, while still fairly intense over the lake, it was weakening as it pushed farther onto the north shore, and we did not see nearly the accumulations of those rain totals north of the lake that we saw on the south shore. And again, kind of continuing that more erratic path through southeast Louisiana. And this was the satellite presentation, started to intensify, but as it got a little bit closer to the coastline, notice how those brighter cloud tops really started to fall apart. Wind shear and dry air started to play a huge role. We got this last ditch effort by the center of the storm to give us that little burst of convection, and that was the heavy rainfall that we saw kind of ride along and bring in the flooding threat of the 6 to 8+ inches from the bayou parishes, river parishes, metro area. Really, though, fell apart as it moved farther north. And one of the satellite presentations that we kept showing last night was that it really lost any semblance of being a tropical system. That wind shear and dry air had just about blown all of those taller cloud tops well removed off to the east. So the latest, as of 4 o'clock, it is post-tropical, so it is no longer a tropical system. Still a rainmaker and will likely impact areas across parts of the Mississippi Valley for the next couple of days as a rainmaker, and we'll kind of detail what may be its future coming up. But at the moment, no longer a tropical system, so the Hurricane Center has stopped issuing advisories. It's kind of gone on to being more of a rain issue than a tropical issue. Speaking of rain, here are the totals that we saw, the official totals and some of the highest that we could find. 7.32 at Kenner, obviously a record for the day. Lake Fern Airport had over 6 inches, 7.22 at Thibodaux. Metairie 8, Mandeville 9. So thankfully, while we did see some isolated high totals on the North Shore, widespread it wasn't nearly as much as what we saw over JP. Wind gusts, though, boy, they were strong and all at above hurricane force, even in the city. Kenner had a 78-mile-an-hour wind. Dulac had 96, obviously much stronger as it was coming in along the coastline, such as Cocodrie at 93. But Slidell had 55, 54 at Mandeville, and 70-mile-per-hour winds at Actually, I just forgot which city that was looking at 70-mile-per-hour winds at home. Winds obviously far more diminished. The rainfall long gone. We've actually started to see a lot more sunshine and a much nicer period of weather on the way. We'll talk more about how what is left of Francine could maybe bring us a little bit of rainfall late this weekend. More on that in a few minutes.
All right, Chris, thank you so much.